Eddie, lovely to see you. Thank you for coming back on the Mindful podcast.
Dermot, round 2.
Yeah, I know. Season 2, round 2. And
I mustn't have done something really bad the last time, huh?
well,
I
you
could
did
reframe
some
that.
things,
Did I do some things well?
You're on probationary period.
I'm still on probation. Okay, that's all right.
It's lovely to have you. Can we talk about neurodiversity?
Yes.
Because as well as something I'm curious about myself, slightly confused, I have to admit, because it's a big topic, but also because we've had a lot of requests from listeners to the Mindful podcast to maybe explain to them, break it down to them. A lot of people listening might be dealing with children who maybe are displaying signs of possible neurodiversity, and they're wondering, is it something they should investigate or leave alone, or maybe they're just a little bit confused about the whole topic. So it'd be nice to dig into your experience of dealing with these topics and see where we can go with it.
Yeah, well, I think thanks very much. It's a very interesting area, and thankfully we're moving towards better understandings as well. So my background is a clinical psychologist.
Yeah,
that's like a shrink without drugs. But we look at behavioural and emotional factors, and we look at that right through lifespan, so from young children to older adults. And I've seen children as young as 1.5 years, 2 years getting a diagnosis, and I've seen older adults in their mid-70s getting a diagnosis. So it's a very interesting topic, a very important topic. And one of the things I would say around neurodiversity can mean many different things, okay? But we need to look at what we call a neuroaffirmative look. Because say in my training, or in the training, I've trained like back in 1997, we looked at, it was a deficit-based model. What was wrong? What could be fixed? And thankfully, we've emerged out of that, and we're looking at, and that's not dismissing, obviously some children or adults have real struggles here, but also, and it's not a Pollyanna way of looking at things either, but we are starting to look at things in what we call more neuroaffirmative ways, and that's really important. So
neuroaffirmative would be really focusing on the positives and seeing differences.
The strengths.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the strengths. And you see, I often think, when I think about neurodiversity, I think it's like a tennis court, okay? If you want.
Okay.
Okay, so, but there's different courts. You've the court of education. You have the court of law. You have the court of the work environment. You have the court of the family environment. And some people will need and seek, understandably, a diagnosis for where they're at in their lives. So, for example, for parents who see their child struggling, they will identify that they need a pathway. I'll talk about the referral pathways and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they will see that they want to get help and support, and they want to get supports into the school setting for the child. So whether it's special needs assistance, or whether it's movement breaks, or whatever the supports that's required. So that's the interest. So it depends on where the person is in the life stage is around this. For suffering, an adult, it could be in the working environment. I often go into companies and talk, because neurodiversity is broad. It's not, and I'm really, first of all, I'm really delighted that I'm speaking about it, because I'm going to speak about the breadth of it in a way. I'm not a neurodiverse. I'm not autistic. Person, but I'm glad you have somebody with neurodiversity on the podcast, because that's really important to me as well.
Yeah. That is,
I'm not speaking about individuals without somebody being on the podcast. It shows that approach, inclusive approach. That's really important. So neurodiversity can come in many different things. Can be around autism, can be around ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And that word disorder, we're going to put that in parenthesis or whatever, and we're going to talk about disorder, the language that's used around this. Dyslexia. Dyscalculia is the maths form of dyslexia. And there's many, dyspraxia, that's the movement coordination challenges that people have. So it's not a one size fits all. And it depends again on what court we're talking about. But if someone asks me what is neurodiversity, I'd say it's that It's about brain difference. And it's about all brains are different. There's no one brain in the world that's the same, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And we have a crazy system where we've segmented out, for example, ADHD might go down the pathway of a CAM service, child and adolescent mental health service for a diagnosis, or for an autistic person or child, that the pathway would be around either disability service to look at where the diagnosis would be made. And I think in time, and hopefully in a very near future, Dermot, what I would see is that our children will be seen in a neurology department. A one-stop shop. Parents are struggling, fed up, and adults, they don't know where to go. And you need a one-stop shop where there's one door in, whether regardless of the presentation, where people can identify and help people support in the identification of that neurodiversity. Because with that identification, then you can assist the individual. But effectively, it's neurodiversity is it's a natural and variation in human brain functioning.
Yeah.
So it is.
Do you think there's a generation coming through now, just looking at my own kids and their friends, and is there a generation coming through that are just displaying more of those neurodiverse symptoms, that it's where the way our brains are going?
No, I don't think it's particularly like that. I think we're increasingly so some of the recent research would show that in the CDC in America would talk about 1 in 36 children would have neurodiversity. In other studies, it would be about 1 to 100. So but it's very difficult. What I think you're reflecting on there is the growth of the recognition of children. Because remember, like when I was in school, it was, it was the boy and a girl that were kept at the back of the class.
Yeah.
Or they were struggling with the reading. And we've heard the impact more recently around physical violence that was made on children in classes because of the trying to keep up and struggle with reading. But sure, that could have been dyslexia.
Yeah.
When you think about it. So, so let's take a little just step back and we'll just slow it down a bit, if that's okay. And we'll talk about ADHD first, if that's all right. Okay. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I remember years ago, people would say it, but the parents would say it, but I give them a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But it's not the attention deficit is our ability to concentrate. It's not about this is not about parenting. This is the way our brains are wired. And so it's attention, ADHD comes in sort of two pathways, or a mixed pathway. One pathway is a lot of behavioral hyperactivity, so inability to sit down, a lot of... So one of the things we'd say there is what can really support that type of ADHD presentation is movement breaks. And it's great in schools, like to do the mile a day and stuff like that can be really helpful. But for some kids, it might be coming out, or young teenagers coming out and doing a movement break and then going back in. The other component of that is the capacity to attend, to bring concentration to the task. And as you can imagine, in a lot of neurodiversity, in the type of schooling that we have, that's very much like I call it a motorway, and the kids on the side roads struggle, and that is the capacity to attend, that attention piece, concentration difficulties can be a big struggle. So generally the formalised pathway for ADHD assessment is a parent would go to a GP and the GP would refer to an ADHD, and unfortunately there are significant waiting lists up and down the country. And that diagnosis would happen, and for some there may be a trial of medication. The medications generally are amphetamines, which is quite unusual. People think, why would they give something to speed up the brain, to slow down? But it has a paradoxical effect. And then there are windows of holiday windows where the medication would be given to assist with growth, so it wouldn't impact on growth. And for some people, medication could play a role. in supporting the. I always remember an adult that came to see me, most wonderful young man, and he was the most. When I did the assessment, he was the brightest person I ever saw, highest IQ, and he was a graphic artist, and he was just an incredible man, but really struggled to get out of bed. Planning and coordination was a huge thing. So getting to like a meeting for 10 o'clock and doing client work, or structuring and getting. So that whole planning and coordination is a big issue for individuals with ADHD. So imagine trying to get a kid out to school every morning for 9 o'clock as a parent. So maybe there needs to be a level of flexibility around attendance, and maybe like a delayed attendance and stuff like that to facilitate a child like that. So the challenge for us is to start looking at accommodations to support. Traditionally and wrongly, clinicians were about fixing and curing, but now we're looking at how do we accommodate and support. And there's some great thought leaders in Ireland around this as well. We've Davida Hartman, a psychologist who does lovely work and very neuroaffirmative work, and Maeve Kavanagh in this whole area. I don't myself do any one-to-one, so don't be contacting me for one-to-one. But because I just whatever, don't have a capacity. I'm caring for my dad at the moment. He's 89, so I just don't have that capacity. But what I'm saying is, that's the pathway for ADHD and how it falls in. Some people then have that mixed type combination of the hyperactivity and a combination.
I'm interested, and maybe you can't drill down into all of them, but I'm interested in the other symptoms that people display. I'm probably not phrasing that right, but you talked about difficulty with time management and time planning. Yeah.
So that would be.
What else would people with ADHD experience?
The technical bit would be it's executive functioning. It's the planning and executive functioning.
Okay.
And it's the problems around that. So that can have huge problems around relationship difficulties, around connecting with others, or the hyperactivity can if you're a kid and you're bouncing around the place and you need that movement and you're being asked to sit down and stuff like that. So that then can lead to the educational attainment. So you could have a very bright kid but is not educationally achieving because the environment isn't supported around structuring for his needs or her needs. I use the word he because probably more boys. I'm going to do a special call out for women and girls because masking is a huge feature. And I'm going to talk about that now with autism in a few minutes. Okay, because it's such an energy drain, and it's a particular component for it's a particular component. But if you imagine that, if you're struggling in that world, what do you internalize about yourself? What do you say about yourself as a kid, as an adult?
Are people very hard on themselves and going, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I get my shit together?"
It's almost like saying that, people are telling me I'm flawed. You again could start internalizing that and saying you're flawed. But I'm saying you're not flawed. What I'm saying is your brain is this way. And I'm going to tell you that there's strengths as well. With staying with the ADHD, there's a capacity to hyper-focus. There's a capacity to stay on task and do incredible work. There's a capacity for sales. If you want to go out with a drink with somebody, going out with somebody with ADHD, it's a lot of fun because they're creative. They're engaging. They're fun to be around. So all that social skills, we don't measure. Like the Irish Leaving Cert or whatever education system we have doesn't look at teamworking, creativity, out-of-the-box thinking, the capacity to, these are the skills that are looked at. And I've been up through talk to companies, and very interesting companies have got me in to talk about neurodiversity, understandably, because I'm talking about the range of it, and it can help the senior leadership team or workers in the company to talk about the strengths, and companies are seeing it now as a competitive advantage to have workers with neurodiversity in there, because they can create accommodations. But like if they want somebody to go out and do sales and ask somebody and to be connect with somebody and to think outside the box and have a hyper focus and an ability, even though they might struggle at one end, to come in. But then when they're involved, if they have the hyper focus, they're able to deliver the goods. It's a huge strength.
Yeah. And I love that, focusing on the strengths.
You know what then is the other, the dyslexia is a struggle, obviously, and the maths dyslexia, dyscalculia. It's a hard word to say. I always struggle over that one. To show my Midland accent over that. But and in our family, there's, you know, I have family members with this, and there's no real accommodations for those that have dyslexia for maths. And
I guess the idea of dyslexia that we'd have in our heads is words being jumbled up, but it's far broader than that, isn't it?
It's broader, yeah. It's not just word, like people who struggle with reading and stuff like that. And there is accommodations made around maybe laptop use or scribes or... But see, if you think about it, right, all of these presentations, let's say the world, you're seeing what we see now. We see lights and whatever, but you're outside and you're seeing camera, or you're seeing cars, and you're in school and you're looking at a text or a board or whatever. But effectively, you're taking information in to your brain, okay? And now your brain is trying to accommodate this information, and it can be a sense of being overwhelmed. So it can, and your brain can get tired. And they say a kid that's trying to read with dyslexia and stuff like that, or adult, you know, it could be that looking at a TV program has more relevance, or auditory, listening to it through. So what's the channel that you can look at to try and support the learning, if you're in a learning environment, or if it's in entertaining environment or whatever? What's the channel? Because people can get overwhelmed. I know we're skipping through them, but I think we should talk about autism, you know.
Yeah.
And you see, we talk about first-person language now. First-person language is, I've autism, I'm an autistic person. And years ago, I'd say the person had autism.
Yeah.
Now, it's up to the individual themselves how they want to see that. Some people, it makes a lot of sense for. Some people, and it's like, that's my tribe. I'm in the neurodiverse tribe. You're neurotypical. I'm neurotypical. Someone else is neurodiverse. And that's it gives a sense of meaning. So it does. Very powerful sense of meaning. But social, emotional and behavioural are sort of the issues. We use a thing called the DSM. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Okay.
And this goes back to the courts, okay?
Yeah.
I don't mean the legal courts. I mean the tennis court.
Yeah.
So it's the playbook that is used by professionals to diagnose ADHD or autism, and the DSM-5 is what clinicians would use, and some tools around that and clinical interviews. And a big note of caution here: there are charlatans out there. There are charlatans out there saying they're psychologists and they're not. You can check on different investigations, and RTE or whatever, Primetime Investigations did a piece there, because psychologists is not CORU is the registration body for professionals. It's not currently registered. So you could call yourself a psychologist, Dermot. You can go out and do autism assessments and nobody can stop you. Obviously, you wouldn't be recognised and they wouldn't be accepted by the schools. But what has happened is these charlatans have generally charged less than the going rate. Parents are really struggling. This is going in at a very vulnerable families and group around getting a diagnosis. And so what we'd say is check that your psychologist is registered with the Psychological Society of Ireland. And in that way, you'll know that they're a registered chartered psychologist. And it can be and that they've experience and that the assessment is a multidisciplinary assessment. So, for example, particularly for autism, that would be an assessment with a psychologist, and also would be probably be a speech and language therapist or an occupational therapist would assist in the diagnosis as well.
Yeah.
So that's a diagnosis, multidisciplinary diagnosis. Yeah.
Maybe we'll circle back to pathways at the end, just so if people are looking for what to do across some of those whether it's ADHD or autism, whatever it happens to be. But I'm interested in getting back to the autism and the masking that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, really important, right? Yeah. So what we know is that because the fair sex women, right, unbelievable. For men, if you think about it, if I get 100 calls, and for men folk, 90 of them are by their women who are out there. Their mums, their lovers, their sisters, their girlfriends, whatever. They're supporting men. Men rarely pick up the phone. But just going back, women engage in what's just because they're masking, social masking.
Yeah.
And this social masking is hugely tiring, and it can create burnout for the individual, that they're trying to conform their neurodiverse brain, and because they're so bright, if you want, they're trying to conform to a neurotypical world.
Yeah.
And this masking is hugely impactful. It can cause high levels of stress. It can burn out. It can because you're. What we need to do is look at creating environments where people can be themselves, their authentic self.
Yeah,
and that's really where.
Do you think women mask more then? They're
that's
they're
the
going
evidence.
around undiagnosed and just masking.
Well, a lot of people going around undiagnosed.
Yeah.
There's a value and maybe on getting diagnosis for some, and there's not a value for others. You know. So, for example, let's say you can't be autistic and join the An Garda Síochána, okay? But there's many autistic people in An Garda Síochána, so it wouldn't be an advantage to get that diagnosis, if that makes sense, you know? So,
but it helps people make sense of themselves.
It does, yeah.
A lot of the time too, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So the masking, it can be very, I suppose, detrimental to the person's own well-being.
Yeah.
High levels of stress, anxiety, and burnout. And women are engaged, and girls and women are engaged in more masking than men. Getting a diagnosis can be very liberating for people. So it can. Because it can start making sense or meaning. And going back to that older adult, that person in their late 70s, who it made sense to their life. And you see this, whether it's in their 20s, 30, 40, 50, 60s, whatever, that people who have operated in the world in their own way, and they get a confirmation that they're autistic. It can be a sense of relief for them. It can be a sense of making sense of their world. It can be so powerful, incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It can be, and then they can talk to their family members about it, and family members can understand. There's a big issue around sensory overload, particularly with autism, around noisy environments, a lot of stimulation in the environment, just overwhelm the brain. And then when you can start making different accommodations around that. So whether it's in the work environment, you have quiet spaces where people can go and work and be productive and engage in the social space. Like if there's big town halls, or there are big meetings, that meeting could be it could be a part of the room, you know, that's or at the back, that the person's not right in the middle in the hub and all of that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's just ways of so getting.
Is there ever any guilt around a diagnosis? Say, for instance, your child gets a diagnosis and you've been giving them a hard time about getting out of bed on time or getting their act together in school, and then suddenly you realise that they were dealing with their own wiring.
Yeah.
And that maybe you weren't aware of it. So there could be guilt from family members around after a diagnosis as well, couldn't there?
Yeah, it's a great question, but it's complex, you see. It's like families are generally frustrated because they struggle to get the diagnosis, and then they struggle to get supports afterwards. So it's a huge, huge area of struggle. We got to do better in this. We really, as a society, as a country, as a health service, we've got to figure a better way to support families. So we have to help them. Because remember, the more we support the child, the less adult sequelae, the anxieties, the low mood, the feelings of difference, all of that, the feelings of ostracization or whatever. So when we can get in, early intervention is key. And I know people are going, oh, they've heard it, they've heard it. And but it's a step change now that's required. We need new thinking on this. We need to figure different ways. We need to fast track families through one assessment pathway. There's the assessment of need pathway. There's a disability pathway. There's primary care pathway. There's a CAMS pathway, and we're just frustrating families. So we are. Yeah, like I'm speaking obviously as a associate professor in UCD School of Psychology, so that's just have a knowledge of those different pathways, and families would feedback to me, how frustrated they are with this.
Does everybody necessarily need a diagnosis? Say, for instance, someone displays reasonably obvious signs of neurodiversity, whether that's ADHD or autism, but they're going through their life and they've learned how to function and navigate their life happily. Do they necessarily need someone to go, oh, you have this? No,
Definitely not. Like this is one of those few topics, right? But I normally would say cans are for tins of, or labels are for tins of beans and not humans, okay? But for people, for children, for supports, for early intervention, for some complexities that are associated with presentations with neurodiversity, then having a label, and who's the best place to identify whether they want one or not is the families of the children and is the adult themselves, if they're choosing to come forward. And they may choose not to come forward, or they may look and say, yes, I have that. Or they might say, there's so many different pathways. They might say, yeah, I have ADHD. I've looked at all the criteria. That's definitely me. I don't need to go and get a confirmation and pay a significant amount of money for that. Or they might say, maybe I'm struggling on the concentration side here. Will I do a trial on the medication side? See, will that assist me in this? Or because it's maybe with ADHD, there's a level of risk taking and and it could be damaging in relationships. It might be, do I need to just take a little step back here? Do I need to get an understanding? Do I need to figure out how I interact I'm neurodiverse, interacting in a neurotypical world, but I want to meet with somebody and have a long-term relationship with somebody. I need to figure this out. Taking a step back can be very helpful about that as well.
Yeah.
So there's no one road fits all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there, because ADHD in particular is spoken about so much these days, is there more scenarios now where people with just reasonably strong personality traits are either self-diagnosing or are looking for a diagnosis to explain their behavior, when in fact it's just kind of their personality? They're late for stuff, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're neurodiverse. Or I don't want to cheapen what people are going through, but is there, for really want of a better word, a trendiness to it at the moment, in that, everyone is rushing out to get an ADHD diagnosis, when in fact it's kind of just the way they are?
Okay, I think
I'm probably phrasing lots of that
there's
wrong.
no. You see, it's fair. It's a delicate,
I'm doing my best.
It's
here.
a delicate subject, you see, because there is a potentiality for overdiagnosis.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's let's say like an iceberg, right? But the level of underdiagnosis it's almost like we're blaming people for getting overdiagnosed without looking at the reality of the underdiagnosis that's gone on for years.
Yeah.
So we're only really catching up. We're not even catching up. We're just starting at the races.
Yeah.
But that piece of trendy, there will be people down the line there will be another cohort of individuals who will be getting undiagnosed.
Yeah.
In a time, often among psychologists ourselves, we say the because the parameters for the decision making on a diagnosis is probably widened, I would say. That sometimes the diagnosis mightn't be in a multidisciplinary level. It's maybe unidisciplinary level making the diagnosis. So sometimes it can be over-reliant on self-report and maybe not getting enough of the family history. So, but I wouldn't like to say that it's a negative that people are going to seek diagnosis when there's so much underdiagnosis going on there. Yeah.
Is there also a role to play just in terms of for the world, like the way the world is at the moment, that fire hose of information we have coming at us every day? There's a sense that if it continues, we'll all struggle to function in the way the world is because it's so overwhelming.
I'd say I'm an optimist, though. So I believe in human nature, and people, it's the course of life that people struggle. Okay, whether neurotypical or neurodiverse, the course of life is that we have life transitions. Life transitions for the kid at home going to school, or the kid that's going into first year, or leaving home, or going to work, or grief, loss, relationship breakdown, unemployment, re-employment. So there's a thing called a life event scale, and it's sort of an interesting one. So I wouldn't be. That's a very what you did there was a very global statement, right?
Yeah.
And often people, when they struggle with anxiety or they overgeneralize or low mood or something like that, I'm not saying, but in their thinking. But sure, if I thought that, then the world is in permanent crisis. It's not. There's a huge amount of people that have who will visit places of times of struggle, and I'm caring for my elderly dad. He's just turned 90, okay? And with me and my family. So that sort of has levels of struggles, if that makes sense. My mum, she passed away a year ago. So there's a struggle piece, but it's not a sense that we're in permanent crisis here. So, and I'd call out to people that are struggling and in crisis to reach out for support, reach out and connect, and then doing the really good things around maybe connecting with others, engaging in the power of the blue and the power of the green, like nature, engaged in exercise, disconnecting from the virtual world and connecting with the real world. And these are things that we can do to support.
Do you think, is it possible that because the way technology is now, and because we've so many things coming at us, that almost people who are prone to overstimulation, who may have ADHD, but it's becoming more pronounced just because there's so much stimulation in, day to day now with phones and everything else, that it's almost being amplified and coming to the surface a bit more?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I'd say the amplification, and it's harder for the autistic person, the autistic individual, because of the sensory overload. And it's really so then how do we support somebody? It's maybe meeting them in a quieter environment at a different time. And similarly around the ADHD, a person can be in a sort of space where they can identify what is it that they can really do the hyper-focus in. What do they need to hyper-focus on and deliver? But the other part is, I don't really want to call this out, I think it's so important actually, Darren, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Is autistic people have an incredible ethical sense and a sense of justice. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
So if you want someone looking after the nation's finances, or the capacity to lie and to deceive is very minimal in an autistic person. Their capacity for truth telling, truth seeing, ethical justice is an incredible thing. It's an incredible strength that needs to be talked about and amplified. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
You when you work, and whether it's a teenager, a young kid, or adult, just the one is the nicest things you when you sit with somebody is their sense of justice and ethical and values. It's beautiful. Actually, it's when you see that, and because say neurotypical people have the ability to deceive I'm saying
Yeah.
it's not that the autistic person doesn't deceive. They don't want to. It's not in their value system.
Yeah.
It's just fabulous.
Yeah. Well, I think it's lovely to use that and just circle back to the strengths of neurodiversity.
Like,
and that's what...
There's struggles and strengths. That's it's not a Pollyanna thing. There is struggles and there is strengths. And but neurodiversity is so you can go that's where I'm going back to our tennis courts or whatever, the different courts. In law, it can be used in a different way, you know, like identifying significant issues a person might have in a neurodiversity that cause them to act one way, or in an education setting, this is what their support needs are because of their particular needs, whether it's dyslexia, autistic person, or whether it's ADHD. And then, but for me, it's just how our brain is wired.
Yeah. If anyone is listening who wants to maybe get into the most efficient pathway for themselves or for a loved one, what should they do?
Well, I'd love to say there's an efficient pathway.
Yeah.
So the formal pathway is through your GP and through the AON, that's the assessment of needs process. That's the formal pathway. And then for people, because of the waiting list around that, then ADHD Ireland is the charity organisation for ADHD, and we'll give some guidance and advice and have a list of appropriate practitioners. And then for psychologists, that they're registered with the Psychological Society of Ireland, and check with the society, because some people are saying they are, but they're not. Or they might say they're with the British Psychological Society, but they're not. They might be affiliate members or student members or members years ago, but they're not active members. So I would really lean towards the Psychological Society of Ireland.
Yeah. Eddie, thanks so much. Really interesting and really helpful for a lot of people. Thanks a million.
I hope it was, Dermot. Thank you.
Yeah.